Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Connections. I am very excited today to be speaking to the wonderful Eurielle. Hello, welcome.
Hello. It's very nice to be finally doing this.
Yes, absolutely. I've, kind of followed your career for a while, so it's been so fun to see all the different things you've done and to now get the chance to chat together.
Yeah, I know it's been this year. I was sort of looking back at the beginning of this year and thinking, oh my God, it's been I started in this industry in 2010, technically, when I first started working on my debut album then. So actually it's been 12 years.
Crazy, right?
Can't believe it. Yeah.
So let's go back. I mean, I kind of saw you with Carry Me. So you were kind of already, you were branded, you kind of had the sound already, but let's go back further. So who was Eurielle when you were going to school? Like what kind of sounds were you making? What kind of repertoire were you doing at that point?
I, at that point, was being sort of very strictly classically trained. So that's my background. And ultimately, I ended up at the Royal Academy of Music with a scholarship where I studied as a soprano / mezzo soprano. But I always sort of had this feeling that I wanted to do my own music, that I didn't just want to be kind of constrained to always performing music that was written by other people. And that's, why I sort of put the feelers out, and I found Ryan Lauder, who I did my debut album with. And as soon as I went off in that direction and discovered what it felt like to be creating my own songs and performing them, there was no looking back after that.
So I want to continue with that, but you caught my interest when you said soprano / mezzo, because I've also been one of those voices they didn't quite know what to do with it in terms of that. So, what was that experience like for you? Because it's, obviously two different repertoire choices you could be going down when you were doing that.
I think for me, I saw it as a positive thing because it meant, I could have a wider choice of the pieces that I could sing. And for me, singing in the lower end of my range and the upper end of my range is sort of equally as fun to do. So, I liked it actually.
So just yet another reason to really make creating your own music a thing. So tell us a little bit, you're in university, sorry. And how did you get in touch with Ryan?
Oh gosh, it's a long time ago now, but I think at the time I had a sort of manager who, I didn't work with for very long, but I think it was through him that I found Ryan, was connected with him. That, like all things, as an independent artist, there's a journey, and along that journey, sometimes you make mistakes. And in the case of that particular manager, that was definitely a mistake, but there was no harm done in the end. And ultimately, he did introduce me to Ryan, and that's all kind of worked out well. So it was fun in the end.
And when you met Ryan, did you already kind of have an inkling of the direction you'd go in, or was it something you collaborated and discovered together?
The latter, yeah, it was totally wide open. In fact, to be honest, when I first went to him, I was kind of naively thinking that, at the time, Catherine Jenkins was at her height. She also, by the way, went to the Royal Academy of Music, and she was taught by the same singing teacher as me.
Oh, nice.
So there's a little connection there. But yeah, I suppose I thought that was the direction I would end up going in. And Ryan, also coming from a classical background, he had been to the Royal College of Music, which is one of the other major conservatoires in the UK. All the potential was there for us to go down that route. But we kind of quickly found that as we started recording my voice, there were certain things that worked really well with it, and other things sort of not so much. And we quickly discovered that if you layered my voice up and you sort of pulled the vibrato back a bit, that was a nice sound. And it was about I think it was the 5th song into my debut album, a song called Je t'adore. We just looked at each other and there had never been any mention of Enya, and I truthfully am not even a fan of Enya, although I totally get why I'm compared to her and why people love her. But we just looked at each other and we were like, oh, this sounds a little bit like Enya, doesn't it? So that just happened completely by accident. So yeah, it was totally wide open when we first started working together, but just through experimentation, we naturally found this sound of mine that is usually lots of vocal layers and yeah, big kind of cinematic sound.
So tell us now about your debut album, because you released that as an independent artist, right? So what was the process of, was it like being funded, or how was that going?
Well, I mean, it was a bit of a rocky road up until the point when it was released, because again, you know, I was right at the beginning of my career. I really had no idea about the industry at that point, and certainly had no idea that being an independent artist was a thing, you know, that you could release your own music. So I was, again, I got another manager after the other one I mentioned. And he had been very senior in the music industry and still was at that point. He'd been a major executive at one of the major labels, and then went into artist management. And he was very kind of old-fashioned insofar as he just thought that the only way you could get anywhere as an artist was to be signed to a major label. So that was you know, what he was trying to do. He pitched me to all the labels, and we got lots of interest, lots of, oh, we really like this, but I'm not sure what the route to market is, and I just don't know quite what to do with this, because it was a bit different. And ultimately, you know, we got to a point where the deals that he was trying to enter me into, even I could see were not right. They were becoming sort of increasingly desperate, quite frankly. And I, at that point, alarm bells were ringing, and I said, I don't think this is going to work, this relationship. So we parted ways at that point. And then very quickly after that, I had a website made. I started making music videos, and I started releasing some of the songs from that debut album independently. And straight away, I could see that things were growing organically, and that it was possible to do it yourself. And I mean, along the way, I had a record deal offer from Warner's. That was the first one, I think back in 2013, but that fell through negotiations. There was one from, what were they called? One of the biggest independent record labels at the time. I don't think it exists anymore. Run by Mike Batt. Oh, can't believe I've forgotten the name. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but they had Casey Mellower. So that probably people can work it out if they want to which label that was. And that didn't work out in the end. And it later transpired I dodged a bullet, because the label went bust not that long after all that fell through. And shortly before I released the album, the final offer I had was from Universal. But that was really weird, because they offered the deal, but then they didn't follow through and send, you know, any kind of contract terms or anything. And we were like, hello? No, nothing. So at that point, I was just like, I get the message, you know, I'm just going to have to do this myself and hope for the best. And at the time, of course, it felt like a bit of a blow, because I had been told the only way you'll really get anywhere is if you're signed to a major label. So to be honest, I thought, I don't know if this will work, but it actually turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. because the album just took root organically and grew and grew and grew steadily. Yeah, I was forced to have to kind of figure everything out for myself. And, you know, I've learned so much now that I'm in a far stronger position if I ever do get signed to a label in future. That, you know, because I've had to be so hands-on with absolutely every part of my career, I understand everything in great detail now. And that's put me in a much stronger position than I would have ever been if I'd just been signed right from the start. So yeah, that's how it all happened at the beginning.
It's crazy though, because like you mentioned the labels and Katherine Jenkins, and they really want that formula, you know, where people basically release like the same group of songs. And it's like, it's almost like it's not safe to release something until somebody takes a risk and it's like, oh, we can all do this song now, you know?
I know. Every time I see a new classical crossover artist who's, you know, young and talented and full of ambition, and they're signed to a label, usually Decca, you know, and as you said, they just release an album with the same old songs again and again and again. And I just feel so sorry for them, because I know it's probably not going to work. And the next thing is you hear they've been dropped, and they're left thinking, oh, what do I do? It's brutal, really brutal. And that could have so easily been me. And just really by pure luck and chance, thankfully, I dodged that bullet.
But it's great too now, because the people can see, like for me, I don't know, watching your career, watching Jennifer Thomas, you know, Joanna, independent artists, it really inspires you, where you have this path now. It's like, well, I'm not discovered, but I can make opportunities for myself, you know? So I think it's really inspiring to see what you guys have done and kind of paving that way for indie artists.
Yeah, thank you. No, Jenny is amazing. I'm good friends with Jennifer. So yeah, she's, I'm always watching her and constantly amazed by how incredibly hard she works and determined she is. She's tour de force.
Yeah. So I have to ask, were you very on having success with streaming? Or because that's kind of, some people find it difficult to break into the streaming, but you've had really great success. So is that right from the beginning, or?
Yeah, it was. I guess I didn't do anything to encourage that deliberately. I was too inexperienced, quite frankly, to kind of know how I might be able to transition my music from downloads and CDs to streaming. That fortunately just happened because the streaming platforms were there and my music was on it. But you know, at that time when I released my debut album, independent artists have been around for a while, but it was still a relatively newish kind of concept.
Yeah.
So there was less music being released at that time, and therefore more opportunity for those albums being released by artists like me to be discovered and to grow. But of course, as everybody knows, since then, and you know, more and more people have decided to make music and release it independently, and it's now such a crowded space on the streaming platforms that actually I mean, this is something that I feel myself as well, but I'm picking up on a vibe with various people that I'm speaking to, that they almost just don't want to open the streaming platforms anymore, full stop, because now we're at this this point, I think, where there's almost too much music, and people are just like, they feel totally overfaced by it. So instead of kind of wading their way through everything on the streaming platforms to find what they might like or to discover new music, they're actually just going, oh, I can't be bothered. So it's tough. I think it's harder now when you're releasing new music, particularly as an independent artist, to gain traction on the streaming platforms. It's very, very challenging now. But yes, luckily for me, when I was first releasing music, and streaming was really kind of starting to grow. It was just, again, pure luck and timing. The circumstances were right for an album like mine to be able to take root and grow organically. So I was very lucky like that. And I'm also aware of the fact that for most independent artists, it's very, very difficult to make a living from streaming. So that my music has achieved that is something I'm extremely grateful for. And I'm not quite sure why, you know, my music might have succeeded where other independent artists have found it so hard, except for the fact that maybe when it comes to the classical crossover genre and artists or vocalists in that genre, my focus was always on writing original songs, rather than, as you said, just recording Ave Maria and O mio babino caro and songs like that, you know, that every other classical crossover artist had already done a million times.
Yes.
So that was probably, you know, something to do with it. Yeah.
I think the original music too, you're making such a teeny bit from streaming, but if you've got to split that out by, you know, paying different songwriters, and pretty much everything you do is original, right?
Yeah, but of course, when it comes to streaming, the vast majority of the revenue goes to the master owner, and only a smaller portion goes to the songwriters. So, and in the case of my debut album and my subsequent 2 albums after that, there were only ever 2 songwriters involved. So we weren't having to kind of split things like a million ways on the songwriting side, but in all cases, for all 3 albums, I owned the masters. So, you know, that's why I was able to make a living from them.
And so tell us about your next album, because it seems like you really take your time. You're trying to make music that's going to last, I think is something I've heard you say. So, you know, tell us about that journey to really make these albums that'll be around for a while.
As I've got older, this feeling inside of me that I can only make music if a song has a deep personal meaning to me. It has just got stronger and stronger and stronger, to the extent that I just have zero interest now in making any song unless it has some deep personal meaning to me. And I think that's a core reason probably why the songs that I make hopefully do sound timeless, because they're based on real emotions, real experiences that, you know, everybody goes through. So they're universal themes essentially that I'm singing about, and concepts that everybody can identify with. But also, you know, I never ever think, you know, what's the latest trend musically, what's cool now. I mean, I have no idea what's cool. And I never have. I've never been cool, but I don't care, because I don't want to make songs that will be popular today and nobody will want to listen to in 2 years' time. I'd rather make songs that, sure, because they're not cool, they're not mainstream, they're not going to be a massive hit like, you know, a song like Ed Sheeran might release, or some other kind of mainstream pop artists. But what they hopefully will do is, you know, they'll do that when they're first released, and then they'll grow and grow and grow steadily. And hopefully, you know, they'll sound as fresh in 10, 20 years time as they do now. So yeah, that's what's most important to me.
So now your latest album, Waiting and Waiting, were there any kind of new elements that you wanted to pull in for this sound at this time?
Compared to the previous album, I think it was more just a case of kind of, because I was working with the same co-writer, co-producer on the 3rd album, the most recent album as the previous one. I think it was just a case of kind of taking what we'd done with the 2nd album and elaborating on that with the next album and improving on that. And for me, you know, I noticed a big difference in myself as an artist between the second album and the latest one. You know, working with Charlie kind of pushed me out of my comfort zone, because he got me to do things that, you know, I hadn't done before, and I never thought that I would do as somebody coming kind of from a classical background. But that's what, you know, it's one of the reasons I wanted to work with him, because I wanted to grow and develop as an artist, and, you know, not to just stay in that kind of very safe groove of just releasing album after album that all sound the same.
Yeah.
So no, we didn't kind of set out with a particular ambition to do anything especially different to the previous album, but just to kind of expand on it. Yeah.
And were there any kind of like happy accidents along the way? Because I feel like sometimes you're just doing a piece and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is totally different direction, love it, and you go in it and it ends up being, you know, really great. So with these tracks, did you kind of find any of those moments that were surprising to you?
Hang on, this is a moment where I'm going to check the track list. Probably Your One and Only was maybe a bit of a surprise. Although having said that, to be honest, even that was kind of semi-planned. So actually before we started working on Lady in Waiting, the album, I had actually sent Charlie a list of song concepts and themes. So actually most of the songs on the album were really quite planned. Pretty much as soon as I had released the second album, as soon as I got a thought in my head about something that I might like to write a song about, I just kind of added it to the list. And, you know, Your One and Only, in fact, as well, although, you know, certainly probably the least expected song in terms of style on that album. Even that one was a little bit planned. So I had said to Charlie, it'd be nice to try and do a kind of vintage style song. I've been watching that TV series, The Queen's Gambit on Netflix, which had a very 60s sort of soundtrack. And that was kind of what put the idea in my mind. So yeah, I never expected to do a 60s style track, but I love that one. So I'm glad we did it.
So let's talk a little bit too about your videos, and maybe you just mentioned there when you're writing that you write them kind of the concept. So is it like a story that you planned out when you do each of these songs and then you carry that through, or what's your process with the videos and creating these original songs?
Yeah, I think the songs did very much kind of inspire the videos. So the videos were just a visual representation of, I think, what was already in my mind at the time that I was writing the songs. But I didn't do any official videos for the last album, just simply because of, you know, budget reasons. I had a budget of 100,000 of my own money, which I did actually go over, I think, by a few thousand, even without creating official videos. So yeah, it's I only did, I think, official videos for my debut album, and a couple. Yeah, actually, no, I did a couple for the next one as well. But yeah, I just let the songs kind of drive the concepts for the videos, really.
You have such beautiful scenery. What the first one, Carry Me, you have the horse, right? Is that like places you kind of knew growing up, or you scouted it out and all that?
Yeah, so the horse in that video belonged to a friend of my parents. I said to my parents when I knew what I wanted to do for that video, I was like, you don't by any chance know somebody who's got a really kind of big, strong looking horse? Because the one that we had, lovely Rio, sadly he was too old by then. He would have been perfect for it. But They were like, yeah, we do. This big grey horse. And I was like, he's perfect. And thankfully they were willing to let me borrow him because he was in competition actually at the time. And the forest where we shot, a lot of the video was right next door to where I grew up as a child. So yeah, I knew the forest, that forest like the back of my hand. And the little pond lake thing that we went on, rickety boat, which I'm amazed didn't sink, that belonged again to a friend of my parents. I think he was a patient of my dad, so my dad was a dentist. And yeah, the castle as well, that belonged to the woman who owned the horse at the time. So yeah, there were just kind of various family connections there, and local areas that I'd grown up with.
Pretty cool though, because you kind of had those influences from a very early age, that just kind of stick around. So let's talk now about your soundtracks. You have, quite an extensive catalog of soundtracks you've done. So I've heard the story, but I know for those who haven't, would you mind sharing the story about, how you got started doing soundtracks?
Yeah, it was something that I had wanted to get into for some time, before I did actually finally manage to get the opportunity. And I'd been to one networking event and I'd met somebody who I'd said this to, and they said, oh, you should go to this other event. It was Games Music Connect, which was an event all about kind of soundtrack music for video games. So I went there, not having a clue really who anybody was, but I watched all the panelists speak throughout the day, and I knew they would all be inundated at the end of the day with people wanting to speak to them. So I'd chosen one person who I thought, I most wanted to speak to, not actually realizing that he represented soundtrack composers in particular. That was his main thing. I actually, for some reason, thought he was more to do with music publishing. But anyway, went up to him and spoke to him, and discovered that we had both been to the Royal Academy of Music, so there was already a little connection there. And a couple of weeks later, he sent me an email and said, oh, how would you like to record a song for Downton Abbey? And I was like, yeah, go on then. Yes, please. And then one song turned into two songs. And then after that, I just got the opportunity to record on various different soundtracks since then.
I was excited to see the Shazam one because that was quite a fun movie.
Yeah. Ben Wolfish is an absolutely extraordinary composer. When I was looking at some of the sheet music for the stuff that I had to do for that, I was sort of like very, very grateful for the fact that I'd had all the training that I had, music theory, and playing the piano, because he writes some seriously complicated music. So that's really stretched me, but yeah, a phenomenal opportunity.
And is it really fast turnover? So it's a lot of sight reading when it comes to that? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Soundtracks, they're always the last thing to be done when it comes to any TV series, any film, pretty much, because of course everything else has to be, all the footage has to be shot and edited first. So it has to be done last, but pretty much always they're on a really tight deadline. So often when I get soundtrack jobs come in, it's kind of at the last minute, oh, by the way, can you do it tomorrow? I mean, even recently, I think it was the beginning of this year, a soundtrack composer for Call the Midwife, a guy called Maurizio Malanini. He wrote to me at like 11 p.m. one night. And I just happened to see the email before I went to bed and was like, I know this is a bit short notice, but can you record something for me tomorrow, please? It's got to be delivered by the evening. And this is just like totally normal for soundtrack music. So I was replying at midnight, yes, Maurizio, that's absolutely fine. And just recorded it the next morning and got it sent off. But yeah, that's kind of how it always is with soundtrack music. It's always like really tight deadlines, tight turnaround. So yeah, sight reading was never kind of my strong suit because I never had to be, you know, proficient at it. But thank goodness I can, you know, do it because I've had to for soundtrack music.
It sounds like you often just have to record it at home, right? Just given the time that needs to get
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, with 95% of the soundtrack things that I've done, I have actually recorded it at home. It was only Downton Abbey when I went into the composer John Lund's studio for that. And Enola Holmes for Daniel Pemberton, I had to go into the main hall at Studios, which is huge. It's in this kind of big old church. And all the other musicians have gone home. All the orchestra just left.
So you got it to yourself.
There was literally just, I mean, it's like a singer's dream, really, to go and stand in that hall and sing, because the acoustic is just like a dream. But it was also kind of terrifying because Daniel is, although lovely, slightly terrifying. And of course, there are all the executives in the control room sitting there, and this engineer who's world class as well. And there's me kind of standing in the middle of this hall all alone, like, oh my God, I've got some really, really, really high notes to sing, and I've got to sing them very, very quiet, and I've got to hold them for really long. Yes, the vast majority of the soundtrack work I do, I'm recording at home.
And so, you know, a lot of the older films, they would have like Audrey Hepburn would get dubbed by somebody else singing. So have you done any of those? I know it's done less and less now, but have you done any of those dubs for singers in films?
Not for people who were singers themselves, but there was one thing, again, one of the most unexpected things that you would ever, you know, predicted that I might do, but it was like a TV series version of Four Weddings and a Funeral. I can't remember the name of the actress now, because it was a while back that I did this, but the actress in real life couldn't sing. And she, in this particular scene, she has to sing a pop song, or a section of a pop song, and then she brings on Emily Sandé, who was being Emily Sandé in the actual scene, to duet with her. So I had to sing a bit of Stevie Wonder's.
Okay.
Oh God, what was the song? Oh, my mind is so hopeless. It's one of his very, very famous songs anyway, and duet with Emily, although again I recorded that remotely, so I wasn't actually in the studio with Emily. But yeah, that was a bit crazy.
Must have been pretty cool to see your singing coming out of this other actress.
Well, you know, I never actually got to see it.
Oh, really?
Because it was on a subscription platform, Hulu, I think, which I don't, you know, have access to. So I never actually got to see it, unfortunately, but I did get to hear the recording.
Well, it's been so lovely getting to know a little bit more about you, Eurielle. Can you just tell us, I know probably a lot of it is under wraps, but as we look forward in 2022, you know, what are some of the things your fans can expect to see from you?
This year is going to be a real kind of mixture of things for me. So I don't think I'm going to start making a new album this year. I say that, but then there's a little voice inside of me saying, but you might. But actually, no, I've got a whole list of kind of individual projects that I want to do this year. So it's going to be a real kind of mixed bag of things, but coming up at the end of this month, I've got a collaboration coming out with, I'm not sure what to call them, because they're not like boy band, but it's like a family of guys who all sing together called Clamavi de Profundis. They specialize in recording works by Tolkien. So we've recorded something together, one of Tolkien's works, which is going to be released on YouTube exclusively,
Wow.
on their channel and mine at the end of this month. And right now I'm actually working on a track with Ryan Lauder again. We have a bunch of co-owned songs that we did together after Arcadia and released as singles, and a few people have asked if we might put them all together and release them as an album. So that's what we're doing, but we're adding one, or I don't know, perhaps two new songs to that. And then other than that, I've got scribbled on my list here things like Greek mythology album, opera album potentially, but not opera in the kind of proper strict classical sense. It would be kind of opera but with my twist, I guess. There's a collaboration with a Dutch hardstyle DJ who reached out to me last year, said he wanted to do something with me. What else have I got? There's a soundtrack release for an amazing soundtrack I got to record a lot of vocals for,
Nice.
for Netflix towards the end of last year. That will be coming out at some point this year. And I'm told there's a really big name, somebody very, very famous involved with that, which is all yet to be kind of revealed. So that's exciting.
So do you get the stories then when you're getting a film, or no, it's just the music?
Not like the whole script, but if I have to record something for a particular scene, very often the composer will give me some kind of idea of what's going on in that scene, just so I sort of, you know, give it the right emotion. Yeah. But yeah, a few different kind of collaboration things. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. I'm actually quite excited about it, because when you're doing a whole album, there's a lot of pressure. But, you know, if you're just kind of doing a bit of this and a bit of that, some more kind of bite-sized projects with other people, and it's all really, really different stuff. Yeah, there's less pressure. So I'm actually quite excited about this year.
And it can kind of let you be a little eclectic, right? Because you have this idea and you got that, you don't have to think of a full concept arc, you know? Yeah, exactly. And also, you know, like with the Greek mythology album, for example, that would be more of a concept album. So less sort of delving into my own personal emotions, which of course I've splurged all over my last two albums anyway, so I've maybe done enough of that for now. You know, instead I'd be going kind of more into my imagination and back into a bit more of the sort of fantasy land of Arcadia again. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to that. Well, thank you again so much, Eurielle. I'll be looking forward to see all the new things that are coming, and we'll hope to speak to you again in the future when you have new music.
Well, thank you too. It was lovely talking to you.